Whether it's in a big band or a small group, the tenor saxophone is one of the most easily identifiable voices of jazz. From its humble beginnings as a poor substitute for a trombone to the vanguard of stylistic developments in the music, the tenor is a mighty figure indeed. From swing to free jazz, from rock and roll to slow jams, more often than not, the practitioners of this instrument have played some of the most memorable horn licks you've put your ears to. In this KCJO JazzWorks video, great saxophone educators Doug Talley, Adam Larson, and Michael Shults are going to take a look at three iconic tenor titans we associate with the legacy of jazz in Kansas City: Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, and Ben Webster.
Hi everybody, I'm Doug Talley. I'm a sax player from the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra, here to say a few words about Coleman Hawkins, who was the first major tenor sax player in jazz. And coincidentally, he grew up around here in Kansas City. He actually was born in St. Joseph, 1904, moved to Chicago briefly, and then came back. Part of his high school was finished in Topeka, Kansas, just west of here. And then he got some of his formal training at Washburn University. Extremely good technique, very big sound, and very wide vibrato. He toured when he was in his teens and ended up in New York playing with the Fletcher Henderson Band, which was big time. He developed his sound at that time, big sound, wide vibrato, and Louis Armstrong was in that band for a little while Coleman Hawkins was there. So Hawk got to steal some ideas from Louis, including style. Then Hawk went to Europe and was a solo artist for quite a few years. He came back here to the States in 1939 when the climate in Europe, the political climate in Europe, was not doing so well. World War II was about to break out. So he came back, and in New York in October of 1939, he recorded his best-known solo, Body and Soul. And the cool thing about it is the entire thing almost is improvised. Only the first couple of measures are really part of the melody. And I've got a commemorative poster here. This is sort of a promo thing that the Selmer Company put out of Coleman Hawkins and Body and Soul recording session. Coleman Hawkins was a Selmer sax player. He was using a Selmer balanced action saxophone, so this is sort of a promo thing for Selmer. They also did a poster for John Coltrane and Paul Desmond and also Benny Goodman. So, Body and Soul, the melody of it, which was written by Johnny Green, almost didn't happen. When he wrote it, he sent it to a vocalist, and she didn't even bother to record it, so it almost went into obscurity. As a matter of fact, part of the tune, was a retread. He had done the bridge, he had composed the bridge for Guy Lombardo, and Guy Lombardo rejected it, and so he recycled the bridge. Johnny Green recycled the bridge, and then we ended up with Body and Soul somehow. And then Louis Armstrong and several other people had top 20 recordings of it, so it was a pretty well-known tune. Coleman Hawkins knew the tune well. He played it a lot, but it almost didn't happen in the recording session. Coleman Hawkins wanted to play something else, but the producer wanted him to play Body and Soul. If you listen carefully to the recording, and I hope you do, you'll notice that there really isn't an arrangement of it. It's just Hawk in the rhythm section, and then in the second half of the tune, the rest of the band plays a few whole notes. And if you listen to the very last note, you can tell that they really didn't know what they were supposed to do because they kind of came in at different times. It's kind of funny, and it's kind of neat because, it was a throw-together thing. So anyway, the melody of Body and Soul is something like this. So Coleman Hawkins really only played the first couple of measures of that, and then he took off. So his improvised solo is something like this. And then he goes on from there. And you really should listen to it. It's wonderful. It became an instant success, not only with musicians, but also with the public. It was a hit, and it pointed ahead to all the things. Coleman Hawkins basically affected jazz right there. Every single sax player, somehow or another, goes back to Coleman Hawkins in one way or another. Maybe not the tone quality, maybe not the vibrato. Certainly Lester Young and other people like that did not use Coleman Hawkins style there. But the vocabulary and all the stuff that went into that, the phrasing, is just gorgeous. And he went on to evolve and became sort of a bebop player and helped to usher that in, believe it or not. So many people he played with and later in his career. So I hope you enjoyed these few words about Coleman Hawkins, and a big thank you to the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Adam Larson, and it's a pleasure to be presenting this little video on behalf of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra educational team. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you briefly about the great saxophonist Lester Young. Lester Young was important to the history of jazz for many reasons. On the tenor saxophone, he was a contemporary of the great Ben Webster and Coleman Hawkins, but his style and his sound was unique, and it was different. It was a nice foil to both of his peers. And specifically Coleman Hawkins. Coleman Hawkins is known for more of an aggressive type tenor sound, whereas Lester Young, if you listen to him, it has this very lazy or laid back kind of, even like smooth is not the right word, because when you say smooth, maybe it conjures up images of smooth jazz, which Lester Young is certainly not. But there's this smoothness to the way that he plays that is not a part of necessarily Coleman Hawkins or Ben Webster's playing, again, both in the same time period. I mentioned that Lester Young was an influence on several people. One of the most famous influences, especially tying it back to Kansas City history, is the great Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker was enormously influenced by the playing of Lester Young, and Lester Young, being a part of the Kansas City scene for the time that he was, played in the great bands of the Count Basie Orchestra before he moved to New York. When he moved to New York, he became famous for his associations with Billie Holiday, Teddy Wilson Quartet, so on and so forth. In fact, have you ever heard the nickname Prez in regards to Lester Young? That was actually a nickname given to Lester by Billie Holiday in reference to Franklin Roosevelt, who she referred to as the greatest man around. And so that nickname stuck with Lester Young, and Lester Young returned the favor and gave her the nickname Lady Day. So to give you kind of an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of how he sounded, and maybe this just kind of super laid-back approach to making music and soloing specifically, I'm going to play just 16 bars of one of my first recordings that I ever heard of Lester Young, and this is over There Will Never Be Another You. So here it goes. play through this, for me, it's extremely challenging to have transcribed that and to play this as well, because for me, this requires having a fair amount of patience, actually a lot of patience, because what he's playing here in terms of harmony is extremely diatonic. And a lot of the way that I think about improvising in my own style is to play a lot more chromatic than what I just played in that example. So part of the thing that's really amazing to me about Lester Young is just his ability to be so melodic with such little amount of information. If you were to analyze what I just played there in the demonstration, again, almost, I think all of it actually is diatonic to the chords, which is extremely impressive, is extremely hard to do, and it's kind of quintessential to the sound of Lester Young, which is why personally I've always had a hard time transcribing Lester, just because it's so different from what other players that I've transcribed that are further along in the lineage. So you know, my demonstration there hopefully heard some different ways of being expressive with sound in terms of vibrato, in terms of bending pitch. You know, we have different ways of using, like I said, vibrato, and then the first start of that line, all these kind of different nuances that I don't want to say are left out of today's playing, but it's certainly, you certainly don't hear very many people try to emulate this sound present day. Compared to a lot of the other modern players that a lot of people, including myself, would probably say that they're most currently listening to. So if you're interested in Lester Young, I have a couple of records that I'd like you to check out. One that I think is probably my favorite is Lester Young meets the Oscar Peterson Trio. If you check that one out, I would also encourage you to check out Teddy and Prez, as well as Meet the Jazz Giants, and then the Kansas City sessions, of course. Ironically enough, I think some of those are actually recorded in New York, but that'll get you on your way. I hope this has been a little bit informative, and thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, Michael Shults here. I teach saxophone and jazz studies at the Rudy Scheidt School of Music at the University of Memphis. My good friend Clint Ashlock asked me to talk a little bit about some of the unique stylistic nuances of the great Kansas City-born tenor player Ben Webster. One of the first things I thought about was his use of subtone. Subtone is something that makes the sound a little bit more romantic and sultry, and you do that by pulling your lower lip back towards the tip of the reed, back closer towards you. So if I play without subtone, it sounds like this. But if I play with subtone, it's much different. He also has a very distinctive vibrato. So his vibrato, a lot of times on longer notes, like on ballads, for instance, will start slow and wide and then get faster and almost choppy by the end of the note. It sounds something like this. If there was really one clip I could think of that would demonstrate the difference, so Ben Webster has sort of a muscular, athletic approach to the horn, a little bit more aggressive, but with some romanticism, versus a contemporary of his like Lester Young, who was a little bit cooler, more calculated. It would be this video of Billie Holiday singing Fine and Mellow from 1957. You can find it on YouTube. And they solo back to back. And Ben Webster closes his solo with, I think, a very idiomatic line for him. Something like this. Then Lester plays right after that, and there's just a beautiful contrast. It sounds a little bit like this. So check that out on YouTube. It's one of my favorite moments, recorded moments in the history of the music. So that's a little bit about Ben Webster.
Thanks again for joining us on this KCJO JazzWorks video discussing Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, and Ben Webster. We're looking forward to bringing you more educational content. Please check us out on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.kcjo.org. And finally, it goes a long way if you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, with that said, we'll see you next time. Take care.